last time with the Studies Weekly, we just kind of did an overview of all the explorers and kind of what was going on and what they're trying to do. But now we're going to start back at the beginning of the time when exploration began. And we're going to go through each of the explorers a little more in depth. So we're going to start in section 1 of our explorers chapter. And section 1 is about exploration and beginning that and the technology that they used for it. So for your assignment, we're going to read through chapter 3, section 1 today. And then you're going to be taking notes as we go along. So you're going to click on the notes and open up a PowerPoint. And you'll want to click Edit Presentation, Edit in Browser. And then when it does this, you'll want to click Zoom so you can see it a little better. I went ahead and put text boxes in for you guys so you will not have to worry about inserting text boxes. So once you get here, you're going to click View. If it's not here, there might be a drop-down arrow next to Help or wherever it may be. You'll click it, click View, click Zoom. I always do 100%, but choose which one works for you. As you can see here, we're going to talk about 4 different things today. We're going to talk about a rush of new ideas. So this time period of a lot of new things began to happen and change. And then we're going to talk about the world awaits. So once they started getting these new ideas, something happened that made it possible for them to start exploring. They're going to talk about an explorer, kind of the first one who set everything off. And then what happened when that explorer got to a new place. So as we're reading, we're going to go along and fill this information in. And so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start chapter 3, section 1. If you want, you can open up the book pages on your computer or device so you can follow along, or you can go back and reference it if you need to. So we're starting here, exploration and technology. You are there. It is the winter of 1470 in your small village in Spain. The fire crackles as your father reads aloud from a book. So now, they did not have heat like we do today because they did not have electricity in 1470. So to keep their house warm, they would have had a fire that would have been used to warm the house. And they would have sat by the fire to stay warm and for light, depending on what time of the day it was. They did not have TV or video games or any form of electronics. So they would read a lot more books or listen to someone read books for part of their entertainment. So in this book, the words describe a faraway land in Asia called Cathay. It is a place of amazing cities and great riches. Cathay is actually what is now today considered China. So the dad was reading a book about China to the little boy or little girl. An explorer named Marco Polo wrote the book a long time ago. Now, thanks to a new kind of printing press, many Europeans are reading Polo's book for the first time. As you listen, you dream of sailing to Asia and finding adventure and riches. So you can see in this picture, here's a printing press. And it was made by Johannes Gutenberg. And his printing press used small metal pieces. Each had a raised letter or number, so it's kind of like a stamp, but instead of being a rubber stamp, it was a metal stamp. And ink was spread over the pieces, and a large screw, which is right here, was turned to press those onto the paper. So before, everything was handwritten, but now you could use a printing press to print these books, so they're able to get a lot more out. So we're here at a rush of new ideas. So if you remember, we're listening for when this rush of new ideas was, what it was called, what the merchants were wanting, but some problems that prevented them from getting that. In the 1400s, a new age of learning, science, and art began in Europe. Historians call this time of new ideas the Renaissance, which means rebirth. It began in Italy and then spread across Europe. So this rush of new ideas was in the 1400s. And they started getting new ideas, the way they thought about things, the way they did things, all started becoming new. So that's why it's the rebirth. And so they call this rush of new ideas Renaissance. So when it was in the 1400s, and what was it? It was the Renaissance. So on your note sheet, you're going to come back over here. Like we said, the when is the 1400s. So you're looking at about 600 years ago. What was it? It was the Renaissance. So we're going to find out what merchants wanted during this time period. Johannes Gutenberg helped with this spread of ideas by developing a printing press in the 1450s. Before this time, most books were handwritten. The new printing press made it faster to print books. So he was able to get these books printed and be able to send them all throughout Europe. So as one new idea started, it was able to spread quickly throughout Europe. Marco Polo and trade with Asia. One of the most popular books during the Renaissance was The Travels of Marco Polo, which was probably the book that was being read here. Written almost 200 years earlier, so in the 1200s, it tells of Marco Polo's voyage to Cathay, as China was then called. Europeans were amazed to read about Chinese inventions such as gunpowder and the compass, a tool for finding directions. European merchants were interested in the riches Marco Polo wrote about. They wanted to buy and then resell Asian goods such as silks and spices. So they were wanting to get riches from Asia so that they could sell them and make money. Soon traders from Europe began traveling the long, difficult land routes to Asia. To reach Asia, they had to cross mountains and deserts. That would make traveling to Asia really, really difficult. And they had to take a lot of animals with them to make sure that the animals could survive the trip. And it was just a lot of work to travel from Europe to Asia across land. So that was one of their problems, is that that trip was really difficult. At the time, no Europeans had traveled to Asia by sea. They had never gone by sea. They had no maps that showed the world correctly, so they wouldn't know where they were sailing. And sailors also lacked the technology or the scientific knowledge and tools. So they didn't have the technology needed for such a long trip. So they didn't have the right type of boats, the right type of maps, the compasses. They didn't have that to help them on the long trip. Sailors and scientists began working to solve these problems. So the merchants, again, what they were wanting is they were wanting to go to Asia to buy these riches, to get these riches so that they could sell them at a higher price back in Europe so they could make money. But they had no tools to go by sea, and the land route was very, very difficult. So if we're going back here, what they wanted the riches. Try and keep that from going. The riches from Asia. They could sell them. They wanted to make money. But there was two problems. The first problem is land trip to Asia was too difficult. It was a hard, long trip. It was not an easy thing to do, and it cost them a lot of money and a lot of time. So it wouldn't pay off to get those riches because of the trip. But they couldn't go by sea because they had no tools to go by sea. They weren't able to sail by sea because they did not have the proper tools. But I started figuring some things out. So we're going to read now and figure out, there's someone who started something which allowed people to do this. So we're going to read and we're going to figure out what happened next. So now we can go to the next page. Go to page 110. And the world waits. In 1418, Prince Henry of Portugal helped solve some of these problems by opening a school of navigation. Navigation, what's that? Navigation is the science of planning and following a route. So think about if you ever go on a trip or if you go on a vacation, when you plan out or maybe put in your phone or the maps where you're wanting to go and you see the route that you're going to take, that's navigation. That's navigating, planning out where you're going to go and then following that route. So the aim of Prince Henry's school was to make better ships, to make better maps, and better tools for navigation. So he was trying to make it so that people could use the sea to get to Asia. He figured, he could make some money off of those explorers going to those different lands. New technology. At the school, sailors learned how to sail a new kind of ship called a caravel. So this is a caravel. This is what a caravel looks like. This long, narrow ship could carry more goods than earlier ships. It could also sail quickly over long distances. Map makers at Prince Henry's school read the journals of early explorers. They read about bodies of water and land shapes. Using these details, they drew better maps. To keep their ships going in the right direction, sailors need navigational tools. Prince Henry hired scientists to improve two of these tools, the compass and the astrolabe. Sailors used the compass to help them find their longitude, or their distance east or west of the prime meridian. They used the astrolabe to figure out the positions of the sun, moon, and stars. This tool helped them find their latitude, or distance north and south of the equator. So by using both the astrolabe and the compass, they were able to figure out where they were at in the world using their latitude and longitude. Kind of like earlier in the year, we were using those coordinates to figure out where different things were in the world. And if we look at this last page, this is what their compasses looked like. And this was the astrolabe. So these two tools they used to figure out where they were at in the world. These and other developments made ocean exploration possible, meaning they were able to go travel by sea to find different places. Portuguese ships began making expeditions in search of a sea route to Asia. So they were trying to figure out how they could get to Asia by boat instead of using the land. An expedition is a trip taken with the goal of exploring. So they're going out trying to find this new land. Prince Henry, remember the one who started the school, believed that the most direct sea route to Asia from Europe would be to sail south around Africa and then east across the Indian Ocean. In time, the Portuguese did find this route. So we're going to go back to our note sheet. And who was the person that set up the school? What was his name? It was Prince Henry. He was Prince Henry. And what did he do? He set up something. He set up a navigation school. He wanted people to learn how to use the sea to travel so that they could try to find a sea route to Asia. And so because he set up that school, people learned to use tools to sail the seas. And found a route to Asia. We'll make it a sea route. Found a sea route to Asia. Now, if your text does this, where it's way into the bottom part here, you can extend that a little bigger, and you could come here, click home. And if you click this, that just makes it smaller till it fits in there. And then you can have it fit nicely in that box. So now that they know how to get there, they found a route, they're going to start exploring different ways, see if there's different ways to get to places. So here we have the business of exploring. We're going to read about one of the first explorers, what his goal was, and what he needed, and so what the solution was. What did he do? So we're going to go back to our reading. We're going to first read about some people who found land, and then we'll get to our sailor. So Europeans knew about Asia because of Marco Polo's book and because of trade. Traders had been long using the Silk Road, an ancient land route between China and Italy. At this time, Europeans knew all of Asia as the Indies. They referred to all of Asia as the Indies. Europeans also traveled to Africa. They traded with merchants in North Africa, African cities such as Gao, Timbuktu, and Jenne. These cities were the centers of rich empires. An empire is made up of lands ruled by the nation that won control of them. Very few Europeans had any idea that there were other continents beyond Europe. They thought pretty much Europe, maybe the Indies, maybe Africa. That was it. So nothing really beyond Europe, Africa, and Asia. Most did not know that some Europeans had actually already reached North America. In about AD 1000, Leif Erikson led a group known as the Vikings from what is today the country of Norway. They sailed west across the Atlantic Ocean, stopping in Greenland. Then in time, they sailed to Canada and landed in present-day Newfoundland. While they were hunting and fishing in the area, the Vikings fought with Native Americans. As the fighting grew worse, they chose to leave. The Vikings wrote about their voyage, but not many people knew about these records or read them. For years, most Europeans did not even consider sailing west across the Atlantic as a way to reach Asia. We're going to go down here to the business of exploring. So this picture is an early map of what they thought the world was. So you can see that it shows Europe, shows Africa, and it shows Asia. And they thought that's what the world was. They had no clue that there was more land out this way. Most sailors thought the only way to reach Asia was to go east. Not everyone agreed, though. One such sailor was Christopher Columbus. Columbus was fascinated by the stories he had heard of the wealth in Asia. He had already sailed along the coasts of Europe and Africa. Columbus believed he could reach Asia by sailing west across the ocean sea, as the Atlantic Ocean was then known. So instead of calling it the Atlantic Ocean, they called it the Ocean Sea. He thought this would be a more direct route to Asia than sailing around Africa. However, Columbus could not prove this until he had money for a ship, crew, and supplies. So Columbus wanted to sail west to get to Asia. Up until then, they had been sailing south of Africa to get over here to Asia. He wanted to try go west. So his goal was to find a shortcut to Asia, but he needed money for a ship, crew, and supplies. So explorers had to be entrepreneurs, which means they set up and ran their expeditions just as entrepreneurs set up and run a business. So the explorers had to set up and run their explorations like a business. Often explorers had to persuade others that the cost or the effort made to achieve or gain something was worth the risk of the expedition. So they would go to people and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is why it's good for you to spend money on my expedition, send me there, because this is what you're going to get in return. Ships and supplies cost a great deal. They were very expensive. There were many risks too. For example, a ship could sink, or an explorer might not find any valuable goods at all. However, the benefit or reward gained was the chance of finding riches worth many times the cost. These riches would more than repay the money paid by the trip supporters. Finding a ruler to pay for his trip was not easy for Columbus. His idea of sailing west seemed too risky. No one knew how far west you had to sail to reach Asia. First, Columbus asked the king of Portugal for money, but the king turned him down. By sailing around Africa, the Portuguese had already found a sea route to Asia from Europe. 3 years later, in 1485, Columbus asked King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain to support his plan. Ferdinand and Isabella were Catholic, and at the time, they were fighting a war to push all Muslim people out of Spain. They said no to Columbus, like, not right now, Columbus. We've got something else we're worried about. This movement to make Spain all Catholic was called the Reconquista. Under the Reconquista, Muslims had to give up their religion. They had to either become Catholic or leave Spain. By 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella had claimed all of the land the Muslims once held in Spain. It also forced out many thousands of Jews to leave Spain. When Spain was united under Catholic beliefs, Columbus again asked Ferdinand and Isabella to pay for his voyage. He promised them great riches and new lands. Columbus also said that he would take Catholic beliefs to Asia. This time, the king and queen agreed to help him. Here's Columbus trying to convince the king and queen to send him. So on our note sheet again, what was the sailor's name? Christopher Columbus. And his goal was to find a shortcut to where? He was trying to find a shortcut to Asia. So that way they could find an easier trade route. So he was trying to find a shortcut to Asia. Again, if you need to stretch that out, make it fit on there. So what did he need to get there? Well, he needed money. To make a money sign, you just hold shift and push the number 4. He also needed a ship. He needed a crew, people to work the ship and help him along the seas, and he needed supplies. So to get all that, his solution was to ask King Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella for money and supplies. Again, if you make the text smaller, click home and you can just click this, shrink it down so it will fit in there. You can also rearrange these so they can fit better. So he goes off on his trip and he actually did not land in Asia. He thought he had. He had thought he had landed in India, the Indies. And so the people he met there, he called them the Indians. But he actually landed in the Caribbean. So the Caribbean is those islands off the coast of Mexico, kind of the dream vacation area. So that is where he landed. But he had thought he had landed in the Indies. When he returned to Spain, he had all these riches. He had taken people with him. And he and his crew were treated like heroes. The king and queen actually did not think that he was going to return, so they were pleasantly surprised when he returned with all these goods. They're treated like heroes. And so that's Christopher Columbus, kind of the first part we're going to talk about. Next class, we're going to go a little more in depth in Columbus, what happened when he landed there, what all he did. And then we'll kind of try to figure out, was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? So once you have all this written, you're going to click close, and then you'll click submit. If you have any questions about filling this out, send me a chat on Teams, send me a message on Remind, or send me an email.